All right, happy Friday, everybody. So we're not in week 11 yet. I apologize. I probably should go back to the actual week that we're on. We're on week 10, which means that we are doing our next Alteryx assignment. So we're going to be extending on it. Now, I've already graded all the Alteryx assignments, and from what I could tell, they all looked pretty good. There were some issues here and there, but for most part, everybody did what was necessary, what was required. And I said that it was really important that you all got this step right because you're going to be using your workflow moving forward. You're going to be using that workflow moving forward. So basically, I want to reflect on something that we talked about back in AIS when we talked about data analysis. Does everybody remember that discussion? Says I've wiped AIS from my memory. So we talked about this back in AIS, and this was for everybody in this room. It was chapters 10 and 11 back in the old AIS textbook. Now, for the new students, they've actually reordered the textbook. It's chapters 2 and 3 now, which is really weird. I'm not sure why they changed the order. But we talked about the AMPS model. So ask the question, master the data, perform the analysis, share the story. And what we're doing right now is kind of the first three parts. We're gonna talk very briefly about sharing the story, which is kind of it's kind of we kind of gloss over that for this area because we're focused on the data analysis piece and not necessarily the presentation piece. But remember, we talk about the ask the question. That's kind of something that's fundamental to our entire core of this course, because you all are doing that for your data analysis assignments for the semester project, is you're going to be saying, I've got a data set. What questions can I derive from this data set? And it's an interesting challenge. It's been very interesting seeing everybody develop their routines. Some people have started with the questions and tried to find data that match that. Some people identified a data set that looked interesting and said, what questions can I develop from that? Overall, I think that it's been a very good education, a very good process for everyone. But everybody's approach there, people approach the question differently. I shouldn't say everybody's approached the question differently, but there's been a wide variety of approaches in this regard. So asking the question, by far the most important. Then we get to the master of the data. Now, what does mastering the data represent in the AMPS model? Does anybody remember that? So that was the data cleaning and validation phase. Okay. That was what we called back in the day, back in AIS. I know that it's not that long for many of you. It was maybe a year and a half ago. Some of you, the old timers, 2.5 years. Okay. But that was ETL, extract, transform, and load. That was what we called it back in AIS. And I call it data cleaning and validation in this course. They're effectively the same process. Now, just old time recognition. Does anybody remember what percentage of time that particular step takes over? It's about 50 to 90% of the process. Okay. So this normally is a much longer part of the process. I've deliberately made it smaller as far as this part because it's not nearly as much fun to do this step as it is that. But if you do data analytics, you have to expect that you're going to spend a lot more time manipulating the data than you are going to be asking questions of the data. So, and I think that probably you all have kind of seen that in your data analysis assignment for the semester research project, as you were supposed to do data cleaning for the next part of the project. A lot of people were talking about the routines they use to clean the data. Not necessarily easy, even with publicly available data, which should be somewhat clean already. It's been a kind of an onerous task, but that's the way it works in real life, is that you have to prep the data for your analysis. Now we're moving on to the analysis step. This is the fun part. That being said, this is the part where we need to have a very clear understanding of what tools we're going to use. Now, again, Alteryx is fantastic in the fact that even if you don't know what the answer is, there's a robust user community that you can ask questions of. And even if you don't want to go that route, you can often intuit from the nature of the tools because they have titles and they kind of explain what it is. We're going to be cracking into a few of the basic tools today. We are going to be doing a fairly complex one. This is going to be one that I developed when I originally developed this assignment. I probably should give some background. When I originally developed this assignment, it was originally going to be paired with IDEA. And so I taught IDEA and Alteryx in old versions of the AIS courses, the advanced AIS course. And so I developed the routines in IDEA, and then I said, let's replicate those in Alteryx. So some of the things that you can do in Alteryx are much easier than you should do in IDEA. Some of the things you do in IDEA are much easier than Alteryx. Obviously, it was problematic to try to do that now because there's a big portion of this class that does not have any IDEA experience because I was not able to use IDEA last year. So that's one big reason why IDEA is not moving forward, is that it's not necessarily been consistently used. Just for context, I'm doing IDEA again this year and auditing, but I'm making it complete and totally optional, which has actually been a good decision because the students who decided that they wanted to do IDEA they've had to go through jump through some hoops to get to those eventual questions and answers. And so it's been a very interesting opportunity. But I do think any data analysis experience you have, regardless of the tool, is going to be beneficial in this regard. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, this is going to be using the data sets that you already have. And I do want to clarify that this is an expectation that you'll be using the existing data sets, what you've already developed. If you did make a mistake in the data set and I did not catch it, I won't go back and readjust your grade, but you may find that it's going to affect your ability to run a particular query. And so we'll have to actually work through that. My hope is that 17 out of 17 of this classroom, that's the number of students, are going to actually have no problem doing these queries whatsoever, at least from the terms of the data that they prepared. They won't have to go back and revise anything. The good news for that, though, is that there's a lot of redundancy in Alteryx, so we don't have to worry as much about that. So let's go ahead and we're going to be jumping between screens. So I'm going to be talking about what it is that we're going to be doing over here. We've got two series of tasks we're going to do today. So we've prepared our data, we've cleaned it. We've not finished our preparation, so we do need to do a little bit more of the ETL analysis, and this is going to be the file joining step. What we'd like to do is we'd like to have a single file that we can do our analysis on. And this goes back to something we talked about back in AIS. Remember, we talked about the nature of relational databases and that information across tables can be matched if they have a matching key. What do we call the nature of matching keys? They have to have a primary key, and what was the nature of the matching key called? Foreign key, yeah, foreign key. So foreign key is just a primary key in another table. And fortunately, we provided that in here, and that was something I had you prepare to be able to do this analysis. So we're going to be working through these, and we're going to be matching all of our information together. Now, I do want to throw a caveat on here. We're not going to be comprehensively covering Alteryx here. We're actually going to be talking about some new tools next week. This assignment we're going to be doing today and the one that we did previously, this is one that I created. The one we're doing next week is one that I got online just to kind of fill in some of the gaps of things that I missed. And then we're going to go back to another final assignment that I put together, which is basically a data analysis task. So let's go ahead and get started here. So hopefully you took the cue that as I was blurting out and spending the last 5 minutes talking, that this was a great opportunity for you to get logged into Alteryx, okay? So hopefully you're logged into Alteryx now. If you're not logged into Alteryx, you've got like 30 seconds before I start, okay? So get logged into Alteryx. So remember, we're going to go to us1.alteryxcloud.com and you have your sign in there. And you do need to, why on earth is this zoomed so far out? Okay, reset, okay. And you want to go to the designer cloud here. So it'll launch. I think maybe because that's why, because I made this window so much smaller. So this should be something close to what it looks like on your screen, okay? You should have something very, very similar to this. If you don't have exactly this, then you may have to do some adaptation, but that's okay. That's not a problem. We're going to be able to work with this. So if you follow the instructions, you should have summarization files at the very end here for all of these. You also should have a select file for each of these that has some changes that I specifically told you to make, okay? And so there were two select files for this for the purchase information because you had to change the employee ID to integer and you had to change the amount to float. You only made one change in the employee information, change the employee ID to integer and convert restaurant number to integer for summarization. So basically, we're going to be using these last files here. We're going to be using these last files because those have got the necessary conversions. So I want to read what the instructions say and what we're going to be doing moving forward. So we're going to be joining these files together in a single file. Yes.
For one that had two words, I put them both in one.
Okay, that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Yeah, so if you did them together, then you just were working smarter, not harder. So kudos to you, Clayton. You got the smarter trophy of today. You actually were smarter than I was, so I appreciate that. That's absolutely fine. I think that I just did this kind of as a natural routine simply because I was going in order of the steps, but you could have done these together. So yeah. So we're going to create one data file for our analysis, and we need to figure out how to do it. Now, I want to throw a caveat out there. We'll be jumping between certain data files as we start doing the analysis, especially as we get to the later analysis. So you do need to make sure you provide good annotation to know exactly which data file we're going to be working with. But let's go ahead and read what it says here. So we're going to join the files together and create a new data set. That's all three files. Now, I do want to put a note out here. We're going to be working with what's called the join tool, and we're going to have to do 2 separate joins. And you may say, well, Dr. Barnes, right below the join tool, there's a join multiple file tool. Could we use that? And the answer is unfortunately no. The reason why is because our join is going to take place on a foreign key for one data set that's common to the other data set. And then we're going to be using a completely different key for the second join. So that's why we can't do a multiple join, because we don't have a common key for all 3 data sets or files. So purchase information will serve as a primary file for both joins. The employee information joins on the employee ID field, and the restaurant information joins on the restaurant ID field. You may join them in any order, but I recommend that we start with the employee file first and then followed by restaurant information. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to create a join. We're going to do purchase to employee, and then we're going to create that or join that new file to the restaurant information. So, oops, and of course it zoomed over to the right. Oops, okay, there we go. So let's scroll down, and we want to go to the range of purple, and you will notice that we've got our join. Here's that join multiple we were talking about. Again, we cannot use the join multiple for this task. We're going to have to use the join. So let's just go ahead and drag this out, and we're just going to put it over here somewhere. And we need to specify what's going to be our primary file and what's going to be our secondary file. So I'm going to move this a little bit over so I can make it fit within the window. So what do we say? We said that the first file that we want is our primary file. So I want to go from this anchor right here. I do not want to go from the summarization anchor. Okay, we cannot use the summarized data because the summarized data basically contains one record. That was the summarization of everything. So we need to add the robust full of records. So we're going to go from this anchor right here and join this to the left anchor on our new join. Just put this a little bit up here. And then this is going to be a little bit tricky. We're going to go from this anchor over here, not the summarize anchor again, but from this anchor right here. And we're going to connect this to the right side.
My select my filter on the top one are in opposite order. Like I have the 2 select, then I have the converter, then I have the filter. Do I need to rearrange them so that they're in your order
No, you can just go from the true anchor on the filter.
on the filter?
Yeah. So whatever your last one was, whatever your last file is before the summarization. Yeah. So you want to go from the you want to go from the true anchor from the top one, because that was what the filter is based on. And that should, you could check that, but that should contain it should contain the 315 rows. All right. So let's go back to the join. So again, we're going to join by specific columns. And remember, we talked about this in the instructions. We're going to be joining according to employee ID. Now, this is an interesting one because this actually alludes to something we talked about back in the previous assignment, which I know was 3 weeks ago, but you're going to remember. If you remember, the employee ID field had different setups for the 2 files. So I had you to convert those both to numeric. This was for dual purpose. First of all, it was so that we could run field statistics on that field. So we could actually compare that. That was called the hash total that we did for the comparative analysis. The second reason is it's just easier to convert this to a numeric field because it's going to get rid of that leading 0. So it should both be numeric fields now. If they're not both numeric fields, this is where you're going to run into a problem. But if you do the employee ID in the first one, it should automatically identify the employee ID in the second column. Again, the biggest issue that runs into here is when students do not do a full conversion of the employee ID field and they leave one as a character and one as a numeric field. You can't match string field to integer field or string field to amount field or to a float field. They have to be both the same type. So if that's the case, then we've actually should have a joined file. Now, this is very interesting. If you look up here, we got 3 anchors that we're going to be looking at. And you notice we default to the J anchor. Let's go ahead and click on that J anchor, and it should say 315 rows. And basically what this is telling us, let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger so we can look at it, is that these are all the fields that had or matches. What on earth? Oh, that's the screenshot I was making earlier. Okay. So these are all the fields that have information from both files. And presumably you should have no extraneous fields. The way that I set this up is that we should have full matches here. So all 315 rows that were in our purchase information should have matches according to this. Now, what do the other anchors represent? This one on this is L. This is the left join, and the left join says, "Show me everything that was in the primary file that doesn't have a match in the secondary file." If I remember correctly, there's going to be 0 records in there, because I deliberately made it so that everything had a match. The right is just the opposite. The right join is saying everything that's in the secondary file that does not have a match in the primary file. So those should both be 0, and you should have 315 rows in your middle join, which is good because that's where we want to be. All right, let's go ahead and make an annotation for this. And I'm just going to say join, purchase, and employee files. Okay, so the next step is we're going to be able to, we're going to need to join this file to our restaurant ID file. Now, I want you to try to do this on your own with the caveat that I'm going to give you the note is that we want to join according to the join anchor, okay, to this middle J anchor, but we're going to do the exact same process otherwise. This is our primary file. This is our secondary file. I'm going to give you like a minute to work on this on your own and see if you can do the join on your own, and then we're going to work on it together. All right, as a quick note, real quick, is that you may notice that my numbers probably do not align to your numbers right here. That is just fine. If you were curious about what the numbers mean, that actually just shows what the number of the routine that you're particularly running is. And if you've run previous routines and deleted them, then you may have gaps in those numbers. That's just to kind of track activity. That's perfectly fine. The reason my numbers are so large is that I've actually run all the routines already, and I deleted them to get back to the original file. So I've actually got multiple different queries that I ran previously. All right, so we said we're going to go from our center join field, we're going to put that into the left join. Then we're going to go from the anchor over here on restaurant number, put that as our right join. So now we have the files left to join. We click on it, we can specify the columns, and we specified in the instructions that was going to be on restaurant ID. So you had to create the restaurant ID field, okay? I had to figure out to create that. That was part of your formula that you created earlier on. If you created that, then you should have a join of 315 rows. Now, an interesting point we want to note here. Let's go ahead and scroll over a little bit. Oops, scroll over a little bit to the right. So we click on the left join. There appear to be no records in our primary file that are there that are not in the secondary file. But if you look on the right join, there are records in the secondary file that are not in the primary file. That is absolutely fine. Okay, that is absolutely fine if there's that. We just will not use those files. Guess what's up, Clayton?
If you go the opposite order, like put the other one on the left and the other one on the right, is that still okay?
It is, yeah. The only reason that I like putting the restaurant file is the secondary join is that whatever is the primary join will present those fields first, and the secondary join will present those fields second. And I just like having the purchase information fields as the first presented. It doesn't really matter in the large grand scheme of things. You're going to get the same results, but it will change your nature because your left join will actually be the one that has no matching records instead of the right join. But ultimately, doesn't make a big difference. All right, let's go ahead and annotate. All files joined. Okay, so now we have a file that we can do our analysis from. Now, most of these analyses will be performed from the join anchor, the center join anchor. Now, I say most because there will be some specifics where you'll have to operate on other assumptions. So make sure you pay close attention to the instructions when you're doing the assignment on your own, because you will have 5 queries that you'll have to run on your own as part of this assignment. But let's go ahead and we're going to run through the in-class queries together. We're going to run through these in-class queries to make sure that everybody's clear of what's going on. So what are the queries that we need? Well, you'll look up down here and you'll see that there's 5 queries that are kind of your initial questions related to this. Remember, we have Truman Smith, who's the owner of Bulldog Business Products, and he's asking you to do this analysis. His first question is, have any purchases been made by employees not located in Kirksville? All right. So let's go ahead and pull the filter tool. And again, we're going to anchor this on the center join. And what I'd like for you to do is once you've done that join, you can actually just move this up here because we have a lot of queries. I'm going to move this to the top so I can kind of keep it out of the way. Actually, sorry, I said filter. Is that filter? That's right. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and select. Well, actually, there's multiple fields that we can select here because again, we're doing items or items that are not in Kirksville. So first of all, we could do city, and city is a pretty easy one. We could also use zip because Adair County has a specific area. And if they're outside Adair County, we assume they're outside of Kirksville. But let's just go ahead and keep it consistent. We're going to do city. All right. And we could say pretty easily, city does not equal, and we're going to type in the value of Kirksville. And you'll notice that you don't have to type in the parentheses. It actually puts in the filter automatically down here. That's all there is to it. And if you look, it's automatically highlighting our true anchor, and we've got 3 records, 3 rows. Specify transactions by users outside of the city of Kirksville. Make this a little bit smaller. There we go. What do we got? We got one by Earl Salzman, which unfortunately you all have not been here long enough, nearly long enough to know why that's a funny joke. And then we've got the venerable Alan Davis, which even though most of you don't know who Alan Davis is, you've heard me talk about him. So most of you should know why that's a funny joke. Greenbow, Alabama. Yeah, he's a big fan of Alabama. It's a pretty simple filter. So notice that this is on our true statement. This is saying all of the fields or all the records within our database, not a fields, are records in our database that it did not take place in Kirksville. Now we could just as easily say city does equal Kirksville. And we come up with a different query, but instead of looking at the true anchor, we could just look at the false anchor. And we come up with the exact same results as before. However you want to do that, it doesn't matter. You would just report those results. Okay, so here's a little bit of a test. Second query, have any purchases been made from restaurants that are not approved? I'm going to let you do this one on your own. I'm going to give you about a minute to figure this out. I'll give you a hint. It's very similar to what we just did, just uses a different field for the analysis. All right, so which tool do you think we're going to use here? Yeah, we're going to use filter. It's basically the same thing as we did before. So let's go ahead and pull the filter tool out. I'm going to move it up here. It really wants to join on something, but let's go ahead and create the join first, and then we'll move the tool. So again, we're doing on that join anchor. What about the column name? What's going to be a good column name selection for this? Yeah, status field. Okay. And we can say status equals approved or does not equal approved, whichever one you want, but you do need to say, if you say, you could actually go a couple of different ways. You could do status equals approved and go off the false anchor, or you could say status does not equal approved and go off the true anchor. I'm just going to do status equals approved. You could also say not approved, because if it doesn't equal approved, then by default, the other records say not approved. But let's just go with the easy one. And we're going to go on the false anchor and see what our results look like. Says should have 3 records. So we got 3 purchases from restaurants. Let's see. We got Stacy Caden, Albert Lee, and Gia Lee. Okay, all paired up. What are the places they purchased from? Oh, the tax shelter. Remember the tax shelter? That popped up again. Okay. And then Taco Bell. What was the reason that this is not an approved one? Food isn't edible. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Taco Bell is not on the approved purchase list. So yeah, I stand behind that statement. All right. So those are some pretty basic queries. Let's go into a little bit more depth on some other queries. So is anyone not buying lunch frequently? And remember, the what would the analysis is what we're doing here is that basically every employee should be buying lunch on a routine basis. They actually have a protocol for that, and that everybody kind of takes their turns. And so we're trying to make sure that everybody's participating in this as frequently as possible. Okay, or as frequently as necessary, I should say. So is anybody not buying lunch frequently enough? We're going to identify one employee in Kirksville and not in Kirksville. Let's go ahead and just run a pretty basic analysis. So we need to actually analyze frequency, which the easy way to do that is using the summarize tool. So I'm going to drag the summarize tool onto the workflow. Again, I'm going to join it to the middle center join anchor. And let's go ahead. And I'm going to move this out so we can see what the fields are. It's a little bit easy to read. Let's go employee ID. We're going to add an action. We're going to do a count. Let's also put first and last count, just simply because we want to have names. Oops, that's not a good idea. I apologize. I wanted to have the first and last name in there, but I don't think that's necessary. Yes. All right. My apologies for that. I got getting a little bit confused on that. So I apologize. Instead of, if you go down here in the actions, scroll down in this window, you should have employee ID, and I said count. I meant let's go by group by first. And then we're going to do the same thing for first and last. We'll just do group by, which shouldn't actually change anything, but should actually just list the first and last name. So we want to know who these individuals are. All right, now let's go ahead and go back to employee ID. Go to count. Or actually, is that the right one? I think maybe. Okay, so yeah. So we should have a window that looks down like this, 34 rows. That's all 34 employees. But what we can do, we can sort this from smallest to largest. And you will notice down here that shows us the frequency of purchases. So again, we had Earl Salzman and Alan Davis popping up, and then Stacy Caden. Stacy Caden apparently said, I'm going to buy lunch one time, and then I'm done with that. Just like her to be a slacker like that. Yeah. What's up, Clayton? Sort and button. So yeah, it's a good point. I kind of glossed over that. So if you go to the vertical ellipses here, you can actually just put a sort in here automatically. I do it by the count, the employee count. Let's go ahead and make sure we add annotation to the summary. So I'm just going to say summary of purchase frequency. All right. I'm going to jump over to query number 5 because this one's a little bit easier than query number 4, but we're going to jump back to query number 4 because that's kind of the last one that I want to talk about, and it's the one that's the most daunting. So query number 5. Oh, there's instructions on here. Why didn't I just follow my own instructions? Okay. So we're gonna, are there any duplicate purchase IDs? Okay, so we're gonna be doing the summarization tool again. Get out of the way. Ugh, so annoying. For those of you watching on the video, I'm having to negotiate the Zoom window right now. It's not getting out of the way. All right, so let's go ahead and pull the summarize tool. I'm gonna join it to the center join anchor. And again, pretty straightforward what we talked about. You might want to zoom this out so you can see. We're just gonna group by purchase ID. Make sure I get this right. Count purchase ID, that's right. And then count purchase ID. And if we use unique purchase IDs for every transaction, the purchase ID should have a count of 1. Let's go ahead and do the opposite of what we did before. Let's sort, but let's sort by largest to smallest. And then we have 2 transactions here. It looks like that uses our two purchase IDs that had multiple transactions, which is certainly problematic because that means that multiple purchase IDs were used. You don't need to worry about the drill down here. We could pull out a drill down to see what's going on here, but I'm less concerned about that and identifying which purchase IDs were duplicates because we could go back to the original data to find that. Let's add our annotation real quick. So summary for duplicate purchases. All right, so I left the best for last. Now, for those of you who did an idea back in audit, or had the opportunity to do that, you may remember that IDEA actually had a tool called the duplicate purchase or duplicate key detection, which basically would identify, or sorry, not duplicate key, the gap detection tool, which basically said if there was a sequence of numbers that should be following one after another, it would identify gaps in that, which is really good for large data sets. So the question is, can you do that in Alteryx? And the answer is yes, but it's a bit of a daunting chore. It does require us to do 3 queries, and they're not necessarily intuitive. So let's go ahead and do the easy one first. And it's not going to make any sense until we actually get down to it, but let's pull the summarize tool. And we're going to do the same as always. We're going to join that to the join anchor. I should probably move these 2 queries. Oops. Let's query a little bit up higher. So according to this, it says we want to run employee ID min and employee ID max. And the purpose of this is to basically identify what is the first employee number in our sequence and what is the last employee number in our sequence. So click on employee ID, which again, realize it's hard to see. And we're going to min. And we're going to do employee ID again and max. So our current range of employee ID starts at 2678 and ends at 2713. And there should not be any gaps in there. That all employee IDs should be accounted for, should have names. Now, if they've been terminated, they stay in the system, they're just listed as terminated employees. Okay, so let's go ahead and add annotation just so we know where we're at. Let's just say min/max employee ID. Boy, my typing is awful. It's going to be a point in time in the not too far future where I'm just going to be incapable of typing in coherent words ever again. So let's go ahead and use a new tool. This one's in the blue one range. It's called Generate Rows. So we're going to pull this over and we're not going to connect it to anything. We're just going to leave it kind of hanging on its own. Even though it tries to connect it, we don't want it to connect to anything. So if you look at what it says to do for this, it says we're going to generate rows using the value from the min-max summarization. So let's go ahead and create a new column name. We're going to call this employee ID. And we're going to leave it as an integer because that's what the integer says we need to, or that was the type that we needed to have for our employee ID. If you remember, our initial value was 2678, and we're going to put that as our initial value. Then down here where it says while condition, we're going to put in employee ID, and you can actually just put that in automatically. Oops. It says less than or equal to, I believe it was 2713 was our top end of our range. We can check that. Yeah, 2713. So while it's greater than or less than 2713, it's going to add a row. So basically what this is saying is starting at 2678, we're going to create a row. Then if that value of the row is less than 2713, we're going to create a new row. We're going to add one and create a new row. And we're going to continue doing that over and over again. The whole point of this file, oops, we do need to actually change this current value expression. We need to actually change this to employee ID as well. Whole point of this file to generate a series of rows that we can use to match with. And you'll notice that if you did this correctly, you should have 36 rows with employee ID fields that are sequential in order. All right. Our final step, this is where things get kind of hairy. So we're going to do a join. I'm going to try to put the join somewhere on here. I want to put the window moving over. So we're going to make the join match on the right side to this generate rows field. Our original match is going to be back in our original join anchor. Do you want to talk about things that are going to look goofy? Look at that. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to do that same employee ID join that we've done previously. Yes, Clayton?
All files join.
Yes, all files joined, yes. And we're just going to match the two employee ID fields. Now it's important to note for this particular join, we are not concerned about what the center join is. We are concerned about what the right join is. Because we're looking for any employee IDs that are not in the main file. Because we're trying to detect any gaps in the sequence. So if we click on the right anchor, it tells us we got two employee IDs, 2697 and 2690, that do not have any transactions in the main file. All right, let's go ahead and add annotation. And then we're done with our analysis for today. I'm just going to say gap detection. But we're not done with our analysis for the week because Truman was so impressed by the work that we did today that he gave you 5 more queries to do. And so you've got 5 more queries. That's your assignment. Now, again, please make sure you follow the instructions on the inquiries. I did have a lot of people that posted screenshots, and I tried to politely nudge them to say, please make sure you copy this in a Word file and not screenshots. If you copy this into a Word file, I have to open 1 document. If you copy this into multiple screenshots, I have to open 4 documents, okay? So please make sure you follow instructions. I will be counting off for people not following the instructions on this one. Have a good weekend. I'll see you all on Monday.